Okay, everybody. I see that most of you are on mute. Can I just see some hands if my sound is coming through okay? People hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. Welcome. It's good to see your faces. Just some technical pieces before we begin. My name's Ami, and this is the first part of what's going to be a 6-part course in Torah and Jewish prayer. And particularly what we're going to be doing during this course is getting to know some of the fundamental states of mind, of awareness, and of emotional intention and attention that Jewish prayer, tefillah, is kind of built upon. And we're going to do that through looking at primary sources and through practicing the practices that emerge from those primary sources. This is class number 1 is open to everybody. For people who want to continue, first of all, the fact that you're here, I'm just grateful to have this chance to learn with you and to dip into these waters with you. That's number 1. If this is a course that you want to pursue, so there's information on the Applied Jewish Spirituality website, and you can go through the links there for full course registration. Okay, welcome. Welcome. I'll say very briefly just a few words about this course from a personal place. This course, not just today's session, but in general, the course that we're going to be embarking on is, I would say, pretty much the product of a full 18 years or so of ongoing engagement with, inquiry into, searching after points of connection in the realms of Jewish practice, and in particularly in the realm of prayer, of tefillah. From the earliest times that I've myself been much more engaged in the Jewish path, in learning Torah and practicing in a devoted way, finding the kind of spiritual life and vitality that is there in tefillah has been an ongoing pursuit of mine. And in particular, for those of you who have experienced tefillah in its kind of conventional form, it's not always such a given that it's something that is going to be spiritually nourishing, emotionally nourishing, expanding our consciousness. For many people, the experience of prayer is opening a book and saying words in Hebrew that somebody else wrote a long time ago, and we don't quite know what they mean. And if we do know what they mean, we don't quite know why they're all here in the ways that they are. So I see some smiles and nods, so some of you know what I'm talking about. We will eventually get to some of the words of tefillah. Particularly the follow-up course to this course is going to be a kind of deep engagement with the central tefillah, the Shemona Esrei. This course is going to be engaging with the approaches to tefillah, not just conceptually, but physically. How do we stand, bow, bend, move our bodies when we pray in the conventional form that tefillah is formed? And not just how do we, but what is the meaning, and really what is the spiritual embodied practice that is contained in those postures of tefillah? Some of the other things we'll be looking at is the word Kavanah, which in Hebrew means either attunement, direction, focused intention, the very mindset from which tefillah can be engaged. We're going to be studying and exploring really what are the colors that sort of describe that state of awareness to us, and how can we engage in practices that are going to help us cultivate that. So that's something that we're going to really be focusing on as the core of our course here. Today, in a sense, I'm going to start with a beginning point that precedes even precedes how do I step into prayer, how do I bring myself into a state of prayer. And I'm going to start with an exploration today with you with where does prayer originate? What is, in a sense, the fundamental source of tefillah as a phenomenon, not just as a religious practice and ritual we do, but really in its more, I'd say, even native meaning of prayer. Prayer is something that human beings have engaged in since the dawn of time. There's something in us that has caused our earliest ancestors to stare up at the night sky and wonder what is out there and how does it relate to us and how do we connect and communicate with that. There's some instinct in us that seeks to pray, that seeks to express our longings, our frustrations, our gratitude, our praise, our hope, our fears. There's something in us that wants to say these things. Some instinct that someone's listening, or that speech itself is somehow meaningful. And what we're going to look at today are sources from rabbinic literature that are really touching on the roots of prayer itself. And I called this course Evolutionary Prayer because, as we'll see, the tradition actually views tefillah and the engagement in prayer as both a product of our place, of the place of humanity in the evolutionary process of creation. And in a sense, the question that is sitting in my heart here is there a way in which engaging in tefillah is helping us along the path of fulfilling our purpose in being here? Not only our purpose in terms of, what you might call a personal life calling, but I mean our purpose, humanity writ large. Like, what are we doing on this planet? What are we meant to be doing? How can we advance and really allow the powers and abilities that we contain as a species to flourish and bring their greatest benefit to this creation? And does prayer have something to do with that? So that's a framing for today. We're going to be reading through a number of sources. I've written them here on the page for you in both Hebrew and English. I'm going to do my best to selectively read from the Hebrew and really explain everything in English. But for those of you who want to see the original texts, they're all here, and the translations are mostly my own. And we're going to leave time towards the end for some guided practice that is based on, or in a sense emerges from, the learning we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, we'll begin to look at where the rabbis identify the roots, the very beginnings of prayer in the story of creation. And it actually comes from a place that doesn't even mention prayer, as we'll see, and from a place where we wouldn't know it unless somebody was there to uncover it for us. This is a number of verses from the second chapter of Genesis. As some of you might be familiar, the Torah, in the first two chapters of the Torah, actually tells two creation stories. There's in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, till the seventh Sabbath, where you basically see a description of a linear creative process where God says, let there be this, and let there be that, and let there be this, and let there be that, and then God sees it, and it's good. And then we get to chapter 2, and it's as if somebody puts the rewind button and everything is starting all over again. And that's where we're going to begin here. And the Torah says, Ele toldot hashamayim v'haaretz b'hibaram. These are the generations, the unfoldings. Toldot is related to the word of birthing even, of heaven and earth b'hibaram, in their process of being created, on the day on which God created earth and heaven. Verse 5, V'chosiach hasadeh terem yihiyeh va'aretz. All of the shrubs, the bushes of the fields, had not yet appeared in the earth. V'chol esev hasadeh terem yitzmach. All the grasses of the field had not yet sprouted. Ki lo himtir Hashem Elokim al haaretz, because God had not yet brought rain upon the earth. V'adam ayin la'avodet ha'adama, and there was no human being to work the earth. So, whereas that first creation story, which many of us are familiar with, telling us what God created on day one and what God created on day two, we're actually told in this creation story all about what's not here. And it's very telling that the Torah is specific about the things that are not here. There are not bushes in the fields. There are not grasses in the earth. And there is no rain upon the earth. And there's no human being here. These are the elements that are missing at the beginning of this story. We'll read on. Ve'ed ya'aleh min ha'aretz, a mist arose from the earth. V'hishkat kol pnei adama, and it watered, moistened the whole face of the earth. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama, and God then formed the human being, afar min ha'adama, dirt from the earth. Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim, and God exhaled into the nostrils the soul of life. Vayehi ha'adam nefesh chaya, and the human being became a living soul or a living creature. Now, on the surface, this sounds like, okay, another creation story. There weren't these elements. I don't quite know why I need to hear about rain or grass or bushes right now, but I see that there's no person, and then there's some kind of mist, and then God forms this person and breathes life into it. And here, the rabbis look at these verses and say, it's not random that these are the elements that are being spoken about, what's missing here. They're actually intricately connected to one another and dependent on one another. That the lack of plants is due to the lack of rain, and the lack of rain has something to do with the lack of a human being to till the earth. And then the creation of this human being has something to do with all that is missing and lacking here. So here we're going to go into the next source. And this is a midrash from the Talmud, from the Gemara, Masechet Chulin, Tractate Chulin. And here, when we study midrash, we're invited to imagine what the text is not saying. We'll see in a moment that the rabbis are troubled by something in this text. And the word midrash actually comes from the word lidrosh, which means to seek out. In a sense, the text is calling us to seek something. It's not sitting well with us, and it's asking us to inquire more deeply as to what it might be communicating beyond its words. So look at this midrash with me. Rav Asi, he raised a contradiction. It says in one verse in Genesis, in the first chapter of Genesis, and the earth brought forth grasses. It says that all the plants sprouted. That was on the third day of creation. And if you look in the first chapter of Genesis, like we described, that linear process, one follows after the next. Day 3, God said, let there be grass, and boom, there was grass all over the earth. But now, here in chapter 2, it says that all of the shrubs in the field, these bushes, they're not yet on the earth. And this is on the 6th day of creation, on Erev Shabbat. Now, just to bring us up to speed here, I had described it as, in a sense, 2 different tellings of the story. But the rabbis viewed Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, at least in this instance, as the telling of the same story. That when Genesis 1 tells of the creation of Adam and Eve on day 6 of creation, Genesis 2 is just giving us a much more descriptive depiction of that very process of creating humankind. So Rav Asi, see these 2 things, is what's going on? You told me on day 3 that there's grass. And here on day 6, which is the day that human beings are created, you're telling me there's no plants yet. So how could that be? So here's what he says. Milamed shiyatz'u d'sha'im ve'amdu al petach karka ad sheba adam harishon ubikesh alehem rachamim. This teaches that the grasses and all of the plant life, it sprouted, but it was standing waiting, suspended as it were, at the crust of the earth. It really was created on day 3 when God said, let there be grass, let there be plants. But it went only so far. It stopped right there at the crust of the earth. And if you look at the verses there, it says that the plants are not yet al haaretz, they're not yet upon the earth. They're there waiting just at the crust. Ad sheba Adam Harishon, until Adam Harishon, Adam came along, who bikesh aleim rachamim, and he requested rachamim. He asked for compassion for the plants. V'yardu geshamim v'tzamchu, and the rain then came and the plants all sprouted. So you see here that the lack of plants that we read about, and then the lack of rain, and the lack of a human being, la'avod et ha'adama, to work the earth, these are all interdependent elements here. The plants are here in potential. They're here just under the earth's surface. But there's no rain to allow them to really flourish. Oh, and why is there no rain? Because, we're adding in the words of the Torah there, because, not just that there happens to not be a human being yet, but it's because there is no human being yet to pray for them, to request God's rachamim, God's compassion on them. And in a sense, it's describing here, this midrash is describing a central missing element in all of creation, is this human being's prayer for rain. But before we even get to the idea of a prayer for rain, let's look at the words that are used. Adam came and bikesh aleihem rachamim. Adam requested rachamim for the plants. The word rachamim is generally translated as compassion or even mercy sometimes. But it actually comes from the root rechem, which means a womb. Rechem is a womb. And the meaning of compassion in the Hebrew language is, in a sense, to provide a womb-like response to something. To nurture something as if it is in the womb, or to relate to something as if it had come from one's own womb. That's the root of compassion here. And here comes Adam in the imagination of the rabbis. Here comes Adam, and he sees a world, and he sees no grass and no rain. And he, in a sense, turns to the womb of God to say, can you nurture that which you have created? Can you give sustenance to your world? That is the missing element here in the story of creation. In a sense, it's like a factory where everything is in place, but it's this request of rachamim that flips the switch and allows everything to begin to unfold and receive the nourishment it needs. And the Gemara ends here, "Lelamdecha sheHakadosh Baruch Hu mitaveh letfilatan shel tzadikim." This teaches that God desires the prayers of the righteous. And in a sense, this whole story, like, why would God create a world where something's there but not quite there, where the plants are there at the ready, but they don't have the very thing they need to survive? That's crazy. Well, says Ravasi, is to teach us that built into this world of creation is prayer itself. It's not enough for there just to be a world. God didn't create a world so that it will just work. God creates a world, and God creates within that world a need for prayer, a lack in the very functioning of things that can be fulfilled only through the turning to the Creator. That's at least how Rav Asi reads this beginning story of creation, which tellingly places the very creation of Adam, of humanity. They're created specifically to fulfill this very need. Now you think about those verses. You don't see any plants yet. There's not been any rain yet. There's no person to work the ground yet. So what does God do? I need to create this human being now. that the human is, in a sense, an outgrowth of the need for rain, which is also saying that the human is created to pray. The human's created to fill that void in creation through its prayer. And so in this very kind of simple depiction, a few lines here of the Gemara, what's being communicated here very powerfully is that prayer has something to do with our very purpose in being created. It touches on our primary role in this universe. So here I want to read on a little bit and see a little more of how we might understand that and how that might be the case. Here, for those of you who aren't looking around on the screen share, coming down to the next page to section 2, it's called A Living Prayer. And here I want to share with you the commentary of Rashi. Rashi is, in a sense, the most well-known and in some ways authoritative commentator on the Bible. And Rashi, yes, did somebody want to say something? Rashi, what he oftentimes does is he brings the words of the rabbis, he brings the midrashim, like the one that we just read here, and he gives it, in a sense, a little bit of his own articulation, which adds to our understanding here. So here Rashi is commenting on that verse we read, that God had not brought any rain on the ground, right? The plants had not been there because there had been no rain. Umatam lohim tir. Rashi's filling in the blanks for us. Why didn't God bring any rain? Because of what it says in the very next words, because there was no person there to work the field. There was nobody to recognize the goodness of rain. Humanity arrives on the scene of creation and has a piece of knowledge that apparently no one else and nothing else in this universe has, which is that there's a need, there's a necessity here called rain, that the world, somehow Adam has an intuitive knowledge of what the world is missing. He knows that rain is needed for the world. He's makir b'tovatan shel geshamim. He recognizes the goodness of rain. In a sense, this recognition, this knowledge of the need for rain and the power of rain, it just was absent. And so when Adam comes with this awareness, Adam then prays. And lo and behold, that brings the rain. Now, one thing that Rashi seems to be describing here that we didn't see in the original Midrash is that it's not merely that here comes this human being who somehow prays, that the rest of the universe isn't praying and Adam prays. But there's something more specific that Rashi's touching on here, which has to do with the human awareness. He's makir, he's yodea, he has a recognition, Adam, that it's touching on another element of what was missing here in this world before Adam is created, or that in a sense causes or motivates the creation of humankind. There's an awareness, there's a consciousness in this world that humanity has that seems to be missing without them. And it's that consciousness of recognizing what's needed and recognizing the goodness of that rain. Now, it's kind of a crazy thing because we just saw that there had never been any rain, right? So if we take Rashi seriously, how is it that all of a sudden there's this person who recognizes the goodness of rain and knows that there needs to be rain? There is no rain. There's never been rain. Where does this knowledge come from? Now, on the one hand, we could say, okay, let's think about human beings. We know a thing or two about humans, right? Humans have this kind of wild X factor, some inexplicable thing in our mind that makes us just sort of wonder about what's not here. Right? Wonder about what's above and beyond, wonder about what's over there on the other side of the ocean, wonder about what's over there on the other side of the stars. And from the beginning of time, it seems that kind of wonder and question that we carry in our minds has actually caused us to seek out all sorts of things in this world. So perhaps we could say, okay, Adam, this human being, has that kind of open wonder in mind that allows him to somehow recognize something isn't here. There must be something else. And I'm going to somehow call out for that something else to arrive here. But there's something else that I think we can also recognize that's embedded in the verses themselves. Because what, after all, is Adam formed from? Let's go back to those verses. Let's go back to those verses. We see that there's no bushes. We see that there's no grass and there's no rain. V'adam ayin avodat ha'adama. Adam, humanity, is not there to work ha'adama, the earth. See, this word Adama and this word Adam are the same word, really. Adam is an earthling, is an earth creature. Adama is the earth, and Adam is the creature who comes from the earth. Even the word human in English is related to the humus, to that kind of mud of the elemental mud of the earth. And then look what happens, right? There's no Adam to work the Adama. So then we get an aid, a mist that starts to rise from the earth. Aid is an even more diminished form of these words Adam and Adama. It's just the Aleph and the Daled. But it's some kind of elemental mist that rises up and it waters the Adama, right? So we have an aid, a mist. We have an Adama, we have an earth. But we have not yet found an Adam until the next verse. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et ha'adam. God makes this earth being afar min ha'adama. This human is made formed from dirt of the Adama. And the human is named for the earth from which it comes. And then God just breathes this soul of life, this spirit of life into Adam, and here Adam becomes a living creature. So we see that Adam is a byproduct of the earth, right? And not just of the earth, but look what else comes into play. There's earth. And before there's Adam created, there's aid, there's mist, there's moisture. There's another element. It's not rainfall, right? But it's the moisture that allows the earth to be sustained. And also, it seems, and we'll see, this is how the rabbis read it, it's this connection between the aid, the moisture, and the Adama, the dirt of the earth, that it allows for there to be an Adam. That those elements together of that very primal misty water and the dirt of the earth itself are the basic ingredients for humankind. Why am I saying all this? Because we see Rashi's description, we see even the Midrash Chazal, and somehow there's this thought that here comes a human being, and this person has some kind of knowledge of what's not here, and of what's never been here. A crazy thing, right? And we can think about that a little bit and say, yeah, we're kind of crazy like that, us people. We imagine and dream of things that have never been here. That's actually one of the really unique and beautiful and kind of wonky things about human beings, but we do that, right? But there's something even more specifically linked to this most primal prayer. And for us to get a sense of it, I want to read it here in the language of the rabbis. Come read with me Midrash Genesis Rabbah, Breshit Rabbah. The Midrash here describes Adam Harishon, the first human being, as Gemar Chalato Shel Olam, the completion of the Chala of the world. Now, just to give some context, We say the word challah and we think of these twisted bread rolls, right? But really challah in the Torah in its original meaning is the portion of dough that's separated out, or the portion of bread separated out from the bread that we eat and donated, dedicated as a contribution to the temple. And Adam is, in a sense, the completion of this dough of the world. Oh, dough? Let's think about dough. Rabbi Yossi ben Kitzarta says, he gives a parable to a woman who's making a batter of dough. And she's mixing together her flour with water. And from that dough raises up a challah, a portion that's given, kind of elevated to the holy. So too, the Midrash says, Batchila ve'ed ya'aleh min haaretz. The first thing we have immediately preceding the creation of Adam, of humanity, is a mist that rises from the earth, is a moisture, is a water. V'yachar kach vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam. And then right afterwards, God forms the Adam and in a sense allows, like that challah that's raised up from the batter, Adam to emerge from the Adama. But the basic components are dirt and water. Just like the basic components in dough are flour and water. So Adam is created from this batter. Now it seems that not only is Adam created to fill in that void in creation, but how does he know what it is that's missing? Think about it. How does he know that the world needs water? How does he know that the world needs rain? It's because that is what he's made from. He himself is earth and water. That in a sense, the way that Rashi describes, he's makir betovatan shel gshamim. He somehow has a recognition and awareness of the goodness of rain and the need for water. I don't even know if it means that Adam has a conscious awareness of God bring rain. But Adam has a thirst on behalf of the earth inside of him because he himself is composed of water. And from his own being, he can look around him and sense, hey, something in this earth, something is missing. And God, can you please use that womb-like energy to give it what it needs? You've given me my life, and here I see this earth and it's not functioning. He somehow moved from these elemental pieces of his own being to show compassion and pray on behalf of the lack of this earth from which he came. And here, I believe we begin to also touch into other elements of the human experience that are not only unique in this evolutionary process, in this universe that we live in, but are the basic ingredients for prayer. Right? We talked about awareness, the kind of human awareness of being able to look around and see what's missing, what's not here, seeking to somehow bring out something that has not yet been manifest in this world. That's something that we engage in all the time. There's another piece here, which when we go back to the words of the rabbis, Adam asked for rachamim. There's an empathic sense that we feel towards others, towards our world. There's a capacity for compassion, in a sense, an almost natural inclination towards it, that we hurt when others are hurt. And we are joyed when others are experiencing joy. And we care when we notice what's missing. On some level, this depiction of of the earthling, formed from the earth and the moisture, who comes to recognize what's missing, is telling us a story of a being who cares. We might say that what's missing in creation is this fundamental caring. That when the Gemara says God desires the prayers of the righteous, desires the one who's going to be mivakesh racham, going to somehow reach back into that intuitive knowledge that I came from a womb and this world needs to be treated also like it came from a womb. That kind of inherent sense of caring is what Adam comes to the world to express, and in a sense to provide, right? We just go back to those words in the Torah too. Adam ayin la'avodat ha'adama. There's plants, there's seeds, there's an earth, but there's no rain because we're missing the one who is there la'avodat ha'adama, to devote itself to the earth. And while avodah can have the meaning of just, digging in the earth and plowing and planting and tilling, la'avodat ha'adama is describing somebody who has a devotion to the earth, to care for it. God has a garden, but this garden isn't going to have its sprinkler system turned on until there's a gardener there who cares. So what's primary in this story? The garden, or the desire that the rabbis are reading through the words here, that there be a being who cares? That what if the garden is there so that we can care? What if our primary job here is to be the conscious, caring element and being in this earth? And there's one more piece again, it's all rooted here in the words of the psukim, of the verses themselves. Look at verse 5. V'chosiach hasadeh terem yiheh ba'aretz. All of the shrubs or the bushes of the field had not yet been upon the earth. The word siach, which means a bush, is the same word for a conversation, a dialogue, a communication. That part of what's missing in the earth is not only a being who's aware and who cares, but a being who can allow for communication of the elements in this earth to come out, to be expressed. Right? If you think about it, there's potential for rain, there's potential for plant life, but they're not communicating with each other. There's heaven and there's earth. There's a plant over here and a tree over there and a river over there, but the elements are not interacting. And part of the awareness that humanity brings to the picture here is an awareness of being able to hear the conversation and being able to actually start the conversation. I notice that there are plants here. I notice that there are elements over here. I notice that something needs something from somewhere else. How are we going to bridge these things together? Humanity in this depiction becomes the one who notices that the world, that the elements in this creation are deeply interconnected with one another. And we are driven to seek ways in which we can allow them to converse, to interact and dialogue together that's going to create and bring about their greatest fulfillment. This is another way to understand some of those uniquely human things that we do in this earth. We take elements, we contemplate them, we learn about them, we understand, we become aware of the different potentialities that they contain, and we find ways to bring things together to further the process of creation. I gotta say, we also do a lot of damage that way. We know how much damage that we do in toying with the potentialities in this universe and creation. But the very same things that can create damage are the very same qualities that we have in this earth, that we have been gifted in this evolutionary process to be able to notice. Things are interconnected, and there are ways to bring them together and allow them to flourish. We can take those disparate elements of creation and allow them to give each other and receive from each other what they need. So Adam becomes the one who starts the conversation, the siach, literally the conversation on this planet, between heaven and earth, between these plants that have not yet received their sustenance, and really also on the horizontal plane, between the different elements that need to give and receive from one another in order to flourish and grow. This is all part of what human awareness brings to the picture. And I'm going to skip this part, but I'll just say it because it's obvious that the human capacity for speech and communication is part and parcel of this unique gift and really unique calling. I'm aware of our time constraints here, so I'm going to share the next pieces and hope to be able to give some time for comments before we get to practice. But I want to make sure that we're able to see the sources that are going to really fill in this picture for us. There's a beautiful depiction of this kind of primary purpose of humanity in this world as being one who prays, brought from Rabbi Yosef Chaim, known as the Ben Ish Chai, who's a rabbi in Baghdad. And Rabbi Yosef Chaim points out that there's a Kabbalistic tool for extracting different layers of meaning in words and letters, and that's called milui. It's the fillings. So for those of you who know Hebrew, and this is true in English, just any name of a letter can be spelled out in its letters, right? So in Hebrew, the letter Aleph, which is one letter, can be spelled out Aleph, Aleph Lamed Fe, or in English, A-L-E-P-H. That spells the letter Aleph. And when we spell out, we elongate these letters, we in a sense are able to uncover some of the things that which fills them, some of the things that are kind of contained within them. So the Ben Ish Chai points out that when you take the letters Aleph, Dalet, Mem, which spell Adam, human being, and you spell out each letter in its kind of unfolding, Aleph, Dalet, Mem, those additional letters, what's called the milu, the filling, if you will, of those letters are themselves the letters that spell mitpalel, that spell to pray. If you can see it visually that the Aleph of Adam, when you write the letter Aleph, in its letters you add a lamed and a pei to it. And the Dalet of Adam, you add a lamed and a taf. And the Mem, you add a Mem. And these letters themselves are the very letters that spell mitpalel. The kind of meaning that this conveys is that what is it that fills humankind? What's the filling? We see the outside. We see the contours of a human being. What is the stuff inside? What is the substance? Mitpalel. The substance of the human being is a praying being, is a praying creature, is a creature of prayer. So when it comes down to it, this is the foundation of our identity, which is just such a beautiful articulation and powerful in a word to just describe everything we've been seeing in these verses, with a world that's missing its most essential elements to make it go. And that element isn't just a person. That element is what that person can do. That missing element in creation is a conscious being who notices, who cares, who empathizes, and who asks, who seeks to fulfill that which is missing. I'm going to take a moment here to look at the comments and see if there's something that needs to be attended to. Okay, I see 2 questions about this kind of human-centric perspective. I agree with you. it is a human-centric perspective. Although at the same time, and here I'm not going to be able to get into this so much in depth, Adam is both the crown of creation in the creation story and also really like the cleanup crew of creation, the janitor, really the caretaker, the steward. I think in many ways, if we talk about a kind of these unique capabilities of awareness, of language, of ingenuity, like human beings, yeah, we do these things. We have these capabilities that other creatures don't have. Other creatures have capabilities we don't have. But we've somehow come to, really make our mark, our imprint on this universe. And that really is, I think, in some ways what's described in the first chapter of creation, where God says, let the human being dominate the earth. Somewhat of an uncomfortable verse to read, but that's what is written there. And then here in chapter 2, in this creation story, Adam's job is la'avod et Adama. Our job is to be devoted to the earth's needs. Our job is to truly be a steward of the earth. I don't want to really be overemphasizing here like how brilliant people are. I don't think that's the point here. What I do want to be emphasizing here is that our awareness, our ability to communicate, our ability to care are the primary tools for us to be able to care for. We're here to care for the earth. We're here to take care of God's world. We've got a job. It's called avodah. And the truth is, the very word avodah, la'avod et Adama, to work the earth, to be a steward of the earth, is the very same word that's used to describe prayer. It's called avodah shebalev. It's called service, devotion of the heart. That our service of the earth looks in some ways like taking care of this planet in all the ways that we're able to understand and comprehend and care ourselves into action. And one primary way to do that, that's perhaps less harder to see how it has direct impact, but is developing the sense of care of avodah that we develop through prayer. I'm going to take us, just for time's sake, to the next source. This is a teaching from Rabbi Yaakov Lehner, the second Radziner or Ishbitz Rebbe, Hasidic Rebbe, whose commentary on the Torah is called the Beit Yaakov. And here I'm cutting us a piece in the middle of a longer teaching. But he's commenting on the well-known verse, let us make human beings in our image, right? Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu k'dmutenu. And traditionally, I forget traditionally, as any reader of text, when we get to that part of the story, all of a sudden God is speaking in the plural, let us make Adam. And it's this question that has plagued every commentator from the beginning of time. Who's the us? Right? God says, let's do this, which doesn't appear before them. Who's the we that God's speaking to? So some of the traditional commentaries, rabbinic commentaries, say we is the angelic, God's angelic companions. But here the Beit Yaakov, Hasidic Rebbe, comes with a mystical understanding based in the teachings of the Zohar and the Kabbalah of the Arizal. And I think it speaks to some of the things that we've been singing until now. So here I'm coming in the middle of his teaching. He's quoting from the Zohar. He says, this is as is written in the Holy Zohar, that when the Zohar is describing creation in the sense of this imagery of God, of the Creator, with a kind of chief architect and then a whole staff of workers. Okay, that's in a sense the depiction that the Zohar is working with. And the Zohar says, upon arriving at the world of separateness, kadmata la'alma de peruda, dihu olam hanivdalim, which is the world of divisions. Okay, this is, if we're depicting a process of creation that begins in a unified state. And then God, in a sense, extends out all of these elements until they reach a point where they exist separately from one another, where it's not just this divine reality, but no, there's earth and grass and seed and every individual seed and every grain of earth and every millimeter of earth and every single smallest speck of creation. This is olam hanivradim, alma de Pereda. It's an existence that feels all the elements are separate from each other. So when the process of creation reaches this kind of state of division, the artisan said to the master builders, "Na'aseh Adam mitzalmenu kidmutenu." Let us create human beings in our image and our likeness. And this is as taught by the Arizal, Rav Isaac Luria, that these words, Na'aseh Adam, let us create humankind, that God spoke those words to all of creation. All of these disparate elements that God had brought into manifestation until this point, all these expressions in this world that's so separate in its elements, God turns to all that God created and said, let's create Adam bitzalmenu kidmutenu, in our image, in our likeness. And if you look at the story of creation, Adam and Eve are created at the end, right? Adam and Eve come after everything else. So the Kabbalistic understanding is that God creates all that is short of human beings, and then says to this created universe, let's make something together. Let's make something that will bear our likeness. Now, look how the Beit Yaakov explains this. So that they would all of these elements in creation would contribute their own power to the human form. They would all give of themselves to create this collective, composite being called human beings. That in a sense, the human being is something created, not separate from everything else, but emerging from everything else, with a little bit of everything else in us. We have some of the grass, we have some of the earth, we have some of the rain, we have some of the deer and the insects, and go on and on and on in the air. We have some of everything in us, because all we are is a composite being that includes a little bit of everything. And I'm gonna kind of paraphrase some of what he speaks out here, that we have a similar depiction in the Tikkunei Zohar, another section of the Zohar that describes the Sfirot, those kind of divine qualities, that each one gives of itself to create a singular entity, a composite collective entity called the Tzurat HaAdam, that kind of grand human image, the inclusive human form. What it means Kabbalistically, and here I'm just filling in some of the blanks, what it means Kabbalistically that we are created in the divine image, B'Tselem Elokim bara et Adam. What it means is that we are inclusive beings. That in the same way that God as the source of all subsumes all within God's own self, and everything that is expressions of God's own self, there's such thing as the human form, the Tzurat HaAdam, which isn't us. We are a mere mirror of. That there's the divine form is called the Tzurat HaAdam, that inclusive existence, that we're these kind of little miniature fractions of. And yet, as these miniature mirrors of that divine image, we too are these composite creatures. I'm gonna read on a little bit. He's describing that each of the Sfirot, each of these divine qualities, would give of its own portion to create this human form, so that from its own goodness it will benefit all of creation. That in a sense we are bound to all that is here. And if, God forbid, any lack would befall a human being, so then the world is there to save it too. We're here in some kind of mutual relationship with our surroundings, with the elements that create us, with that which forms us, with the planet from which we are born, and with all of those divine qualities and potentialities that have brought us into existence. I'm just going to skip here. The primary desire for the creation of Adam came from the screams, the cries of all of creation, who recognized that they were lacking a leader and a mediator between God and themselves. Again, we're describing here a world that's called Almanza Pereda. That's called a world of separate, divided entities. It's like that description in the Torah where there's grass that's not yet here, and there's rain that's somewhere that's not yet here, and there's no siach, right? There's no communication between the elements and capabilities and potentialities inherent here in God's creation. What is it that's going to allow for those elements to be in dialogue with each other, to meet one another and connect, to give to one another? So all of these created elements are crying to God, what will you do about your great name? What's going to become of this world you've created where there's no unifying element here to help us flower and flourish? Adam's job is to be the mediator, to be the bridge between these disparate elements that exist, to be a connector and a unifier in this earth. And here he goes and quotes the Gemara, the Talmud that we saw. This is, as we find in the Gemara, this teaches that the grasses stood at the crust of the earth. What that means is that all of creation was crying out, saying there's a power within us, but we cannot birth salvation without Adam, without this Naaseh Adam, without this composite being where we can all give of ourselves and create something that's going to be able to be here for the benefit of all of us. And here I want to just relate to some of what we've seen until now. We're not going to read on in the sources for today. But the description here is of, yes, a human being who has a unique kind of awareness. But what is it that births that awareness? It's the fact that we are evolved from everything else that's here. We are, in a sense, the embodied prayer of this universe, seeking to advance itself and fulfill its own purpose here. And therefore our job, or our primary elements that make us who and what we are here to be, are those elements of compassion, those elements that can feel and empathize with all that is, because we know so deeply that we come from it. Because we are nothing but an outgrowth of it, an Adam from the Adama. Right? So are we the crown of creation? Are we the janitor of creation? Yeah. It's not one or the other. That's not even the question. The question is, if we are here for a purpose, how might we seek to step into the role we're here to step into? And the direction that's being offered by these sources is, well, it starts by acknowledging the needs in this earth, by allowing ourselves to be aware, not only of what's here, but also what's absent, by being able to listen for the siach, Asada, the conversation that needs to be happening in the field, be it the literal field, be it any of the pieces of this world that can benefit from being closer together, from joining and communicating, and that we have a calling to help build that communication. And part and parcel of that is communicating with our own creator, being, in a sense, the mouthpiece of this universe, to continue to bring an awareness of an all-inclusive reality here. And I believe that at the heart of it is to embody care, is to recognize that the greatest gift that we have to bring here is to care. To not be afraid to care. Right? Sometimes when we care, There's a risk involved there. Because if I really care, I might be disappointed. And if I really care, how do I know that somebody's there to care about my cares? Well, perhaps the only way is by letting ourselves care and care again and care again and care for each other, care for the cares around us, and care for our own cares. In a sense, this is what it means to pray. What it means to pray is to allow myself to step into that field, into that conversation, to allow for the Asada to take place, to allow for my cares to come out, for me to feel them, for me to express them. And in a sense, that's what I have to offer. That is what I have to offer here. I'd like to take a moment here. We're going to stop with the sources for today. And we're going to use the rest of our time here to practice a little bit together and just dip a little slightly into some of this, the experience of what we've been learning. But I'm just going to take a moment and see your faces. Been looking at documents and words here. And as much as we're not physically in a room together, we are physically in some kind of room together. So let's make some space for one another. Let's make room for us to all be here. And I'll offer here a brief meditation to begin to open up one way in which we can open ourselves up to this stance of prayer. And here, whatever is comfortable with you, if you're more comfortable with your camera on or off, please do it, what feels right for you. But to begin, just gently close your eyes and let your awareness gently trickle into your body. Could help to take a couple of full breaths. And here, we're going to begin to let ourselves sense a little bit of the conversation, the siach of creation here, the siach that's even right here where we are. Beginning by just sensing even the feeling of air on your face. The air touching the contours of your skin. Noticing as you breathe that this very air is sustaining and filling your body, coming in to fill you with air and exiting as you breathe out, coming in once again to nourish you. One breath after the next. We can allow ourselves to feel how we're supported by the earth beneath us as well. Sensing that solid ground that's holding us here. That solid ground from which everything that nourishes me here emerges, is supported by. this Adama that is, in a very real sense, the womb of humanity. Allowing yourself to just sense this supportive ground. It's always here. Sensing how my body, my life, my very being, moment to moment, is being supported by this ongoing interaction between what is within me and what is outside of my body. Letting myself sit in the conversation with these elements, the interconnection of what is here. And it may help to feel even more deeply into the support by bringing to mind the people who have brought me to this world. As we open our prayers, mentioning our ancestors, to feel into ancestry, to experience myself as emerging from ongoing birthing, caring for life. I am a product of all of this care. I am sustained by this caring universe. Let myself feel that care. Let myself listen to this siach, this conversation, this dialogue of giving and receiving. And here I invite you to bring to your awareness a care of yours. It could be something you're wanting for yourself or for a loved one. It could be something you're wanting or concerned for, cared for the planet, for others. Nothing's too big or too small here. Just allow one care to come into your consciousness. It may help to even invite it right to the area of your heart and to just put your hand there. Letting this care really be here. Letting yourself feel your care. Letting yourself feel the sincerity with which you care. Not because we need it fulfilled right now or anything about what may or may not be, but sitting in this care, letting it sit here with us. And as we allow this care to expand here in our sensed experience and our awareness, see if you can offer this care to the care of the world, to that very great care that's here. Bring our care into the divine womb. Let it be held by God's care that holds all of this here, that gives place for all of this to be here, that gives place for this very care to and in our practice of tefillah, of prayer, we may allow ourselves to merely open up our capacity to care and give it expression, whether with words, whether with attention. This may be our greatest offering. To allow ourselves to become more caring beings and carers in God's world. I'm going to end for today. You're invited to not end if that's what you prefer. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining in this learning. And if you want to continue learning and practicing together, we'll be entering more and more into the modes and states and experiences that allow us to pray in sincerity and in devotion. So be in touch. And the truth is, I'm happy to stay on the call for another few minutes. We didn't have a chance for kind of questions or comments. If anybody wants to go now, this is the end of the session, but I'm happy to stick around now if people want to speak, and feel free to unmute yourselves if you do. Thank you, and thanks to everybody who's writing on the chat. Thank you for joining us. So if anybody would like to speak, I'm happy to stick around a bit.